The penis shoots seeds.
Why?
Makes new life to poison the earth with a plague of men, as once it was. But
I kind of wish that was our sex ed video in the 6th grade.
Yeah, it might have done some good work, I feel like.
I would have been like, I gotta cut this thing off.
Yeah, it's gotta go. It's gotta go.
It's gotta go.
Although it wouldn't help with gun violence, though, unfortunately.
Ooh, true. That's fair. Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword. Double-edged sword.
More phallic imagery for you.
Welcome, folks. This is Film Trace, a podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production, all the way to release and reception. We are doing Future Wars cycle. We're doing the 1970s, Omega Man from 1971, and Zardoz from 1974. What a bizarre film. We have a special guest, Sean Patrick from Everyone's a Critic podcast. Sean, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know what's going on with your podcast?
Hey, Sean Patrick. I've been a professional film critic for about 14 years, a member of the Critics' Choice Association. Our podcast was called I Hate Critics, and now it is again. We just recently did change it back to the I Hate Critics movie review podcast. We also have a spinoff of that called I Hate Critics 1993, where we're talking about the movies that came out 30 years ago the same weekend.
Nice.
I've been doing this. I've been writing online for over 20 years now, and about 4,000 movie reviews.
Incredible. Talk to us about the 1993. How's it going so far? I see like Remains of the Day, Get Fearless. Any sort of like surprises from the 93 series you're doing?
I would say the biggest surprise is that parody movies. There were 4 parody movies released that year. And they're the best movies of the year.
It's incredible. The Fatal Instinct, the erotic thriller one.
It is so funny. It's so funny. It's got a terrible reputation, but it is so funny. And like I said, all 4 of those movies, Loaded Weapon, and
I do remember enjoying that one.
Men in Tights, they're all
Tights, fun.
Yeah, and Hot Shot Part 2, of course.
Yeah,
and they're the best movies of the year. It's shocking. Like, we just did Mrs. Doubtfire. That'll drop later this week. We all hated it. We hated it with a passion.
Yeah, really? I saw it on a cruise ship about 2 months ago, and it's like, it didn't hold up on the cruise ship.
Oh, God.
Man.
That's awesome. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
I've been looking for a reason to watch Zardoz, so...
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
God.
You do need, it is one of those movies where like you need a reason to watch it, right? Like,
I would say so, yeah.
You don't just throw it on.
It's not a casual watch.
It's something like cash watch. But we'll get to it. First, we got to talk about Omega Man. What I like to do at least is to talk about our history with a movie. Have you ever seen it before? When did you see it? All that kind of stuff. Omega Man, because I chose this. Didn't I choose these, Chris?
You did. What the fuck?
I know. So Omega Man, I had seen maybe back in college. I can't remember why. Oh, I know why. Because 28 Days Later opens up with a single man walking through the city. Iconic. And then I heard that it's kind of inspired by the Omega Man. So I watched it in college, I think in like the library basement alone. It was okay back then. On the second watch, the more recent watch in like the last week or so, man, I like it a lot more.
Really?
Yeah. I kind of like this movie, and it makes me feel weird that I like it so much. I feel like I might be in the minority, but you guys go ahead. What's your history with the Omega Man?
Guess first, Sean Patrick.
Yeah, go for it.
I watched it not long after seeing the Treehouse of Horror Simpsons episode, Omega Man.
Classic, yeah.
I didn't know what it was referring to at the time, and I was like, what is this about? And I happened to be working in a video store at the time, and they had the Omega Man, so I was like, I gotta see what this is about. And just the idea of Charlton Heston in this movie being, the weird space that Charlton Heston is in the early 70s in sci-fi films is so strange to me, because he's this right-wing figure who is getting cast in these movies where he's having to play off of hippies or at least hippie ideology. Right. And he's totally uncomfortable the entire time.
Yeah, he never feels like a good fit for this role whatsoever, but that's kind of why I like it for some reason. Chris, what about you? Did you see this?
No, I have long avoided Charlton Heston films in general. throughout my life. I love a lot of what's going on in early science fiction. The 70s feels like such a strange decade when it comes to like depicting the future, because you have this, I mean, essentially Austin Powers-esque kind of kitschy. It's like you have this, it feels like a netherworld stuck between, like, we're going to end up talking about both Doctor Strangelove and Alphaville next episode, which is like, feels like a really unique kind of interesting counterculture take on the future in the 60s. And then in the 80s, which we discussed last episode, very kind of like high-powered blockbuster. It's a Jim Cameron episode through and through. And so the 70s is just like, I don't know, it feels like the whole genre like is giving up and is just like, here's some garbage. Hope you like it.
It's a transition decade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I've largely stayed away. And so, yes, this was a first time watch for me. I had seen bits and pieces of course, like Ben-Hur and the Planet of the Apes original films. But this is, it was a little bit of a struggle for me to be completely honest, to sit through this thing.
Interesting.
I like Richard Matheson's novel, I Am Legend. I don't like the adaptation with Will Smith, and I'm a huge fan of both 28 Days Later and the other kind of the general. It's almost become a micro genre, like these Last Man on Earth movies, right? Where, and also the show Last Man on Earth, where it's become like its own trope, and it's kind of a fascinating trope. But like, you have to have a compelling protagonist, otherwise that's not going to work. And I just like, from frame one, it's like Charlton Heston like mouthing along with the words to the Woodstock documentary and
I didn't really understand that whole part
shooting his rifle off every which way, and I'm just like, this is our hero, really? And I could never find an entry point.
I feel that, like,
liking it.
I feel that. I feel the same way. And I feel like he must have been like Connery was at the time, where he was Ben-Hur for so long that he just couldn't find work eventually. And he just had to take what they were offering him. And it was these movies like Soylent Green and Omega Man and Planet of the Apes. And he's just taking all these bizarre roles just to have work. And I don't think he understood any of the movies that he was making at the time.
No, he clearly, he seems like he just wandered onto set with this movie. But for some reason, I think that works for me. Just because it's like, the whole thing feels so... the movie's odd in the sense that, you have to contextualize it. They're coming out, in 1971. The action sequences here, well, they appear to us campy and kind of like, over the top. I think for back then, they were pretty like, unique and grandiose and kind of like a spectacle. I can still pick up on that from time to time when, in some of those earlier sequences of like, like the helicopter crash and stuff like that. Yeah, it looks ridiculous, but like, put yourself in like 1971, everything looked ridiculous on film, especially with an action movie. So I'll cut out some slack there, but I don't know what. I think one thing that I've never read the book, so I don't know. Sean Patrick, have you? No. Chris, maybe fill us in like some basics about like what you liked, what differences and stuff like that.
I mean, to be honest, like the Will Smith adaptation, I keep calling it the Will Smith adaptation because I don't know who directed that garbage.
I don't know. I was going to say Gore Verbinski, but probably not.
Maybe, Gore Verbinski.
Francis Lawrence.
The Hunger Games guy. Okay. But like that is a lot more true to the novel. It's very much like pulp novel. Like it's very in similar tone and era to, we briefly discussed the Starship Troopers novel, right? Being nothing like the 90s movie. And that's kind of what the vibe we're feeling here with I Am Legend, the novel, versus the Omega Man. But like the biggest thing that kind of stands out to me, that perhaps another reason where I could not find that entry point for the movie, is the novel I Am Legend was a huge inspiration for George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which is an interesting
Yeah.
parallel that you bring up 28 Days Later, because obviously that shares a lot of kind of homage DNA. So ultimately, and it's also part of that classic like 70s special effects problem where they are trying to do something, like you said, a spectacle, but they kind of have to turn them into just like basically like guys who are afraid of the light and have bad skin, right? and the quote vampires or bloodsuckers, as they are referred to in the novel, are a lot scarier because it's it's kind of like, it's a pulp novel, so it's trying to shock you as well as like entertain you. And so it's just like gripping and exciting to read. And that's why like this film just kind of like reads as like flat between the kind of phoned in protagonist and the like limp wristed antagonists. So I don't get any of the fun that's just like baked into the actual novel, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think I can see though where somebody would like this, and I think it's camp. I think what Omega Man thrives on is camp, and it is a camp movie. It is easy to laugh at.
That is true.
There's a lot. It's just so outrageous. Like everything about it is completely outrageous. Like the are they like vampires in the movie? They're not, are they? Aren't they just like albino mutants?
Yeah, mutants is the word they use.
They're mutants. Yeah, I don't know if they're vampires or not.
They don't seem like vampires. And the one thing I think what they try to do in this movie that really doesn't work is that he doesn't feel all that alone to me. Like versus like 28 Days Later or I Am Legend, where he felt very alone. Here he's like alone for a bit, but they're always around, the mutants. Then he finds this other group of survivors, the children. So it doesn't, I don't know, that whole concept of Last Man on Earth, he doesn't feel like the Last Man on Earth because there's always people around.
Right.
There's like, whatever, albino mutants around. And I don't know, I think for me, the draw here is that, sure, it's campy, but it's also just kind of like a fun genre, very genre-y sci-fi movie about like, a virus getting out, like biological warfare, and this is what happens to the people. And it's kind of just like a fun, like imagination experience or like thought experiment where you're sort of like, what would happen if, one guy was alive in Los Angeles and there were these mutants running around and he's, but I do think that they really changed the ending, right? From the book, and it's got a completely different meaning. Because I don't remember specifically the book ending, but I think it's like he sort of realizes that he's the monster, right? Isn't the whole point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here we literally get a crucifixion in Jesus pose, right?
Which I loved. I
mean, I like Sean Patrick saying, like I can totally see watching this with a big group late at night and it coming off totally different and having a great laugh at that crucifixion scene. But I do think that like it kind of is this. I mean, we're talking about like living dead vampires. Is this the 70s version of Morbius? We've got like people making, you've got, filmmakers making a bad movie and then they are realizing it's bad. And so they're like, wait, actually it's camp. Like we meant to like, like the whole Jared Leto reading the Morbin Time sequel script thing. And I don't buy it. I think that's the thing is like, it just feels sad because Charlton Heston is not in on the joke. And he's too evil of a man, especially with like the history of the decades that follow this movie behind him for me to kind of watch and be like, that goofy guy, Jesus. No, I don't know.
I know. I don't buy Heston at all. I really, truly don't. I think he just seems blinkered. He seems like he's kind of out of it. He's deeply committed. He commits, and I do appreciate that. But he's committed to something that really doesn't require commitment. It requires somebody who has a sense of humor, and he doesn't have one.
Oh, zero. Yeah, he's trying to play it straight, but that's what makes it campy.
Yeah,
right? It's like that's what I can't tell. Was there intention here to make it over the top, or is it just because it's 1971 and they got thrown some money and they had this adaptation? This almost feels like, hey, let's like write a script about from this novel, and it like ping pongs around for a long time, you know, like different writers and stuff, and ends up being whatever we see, which is a complete mess on screen.
Right.
And there's no one that would argue that the Omega Man is like a solidly built film, because it's just so shoddy. Like everything about it just feels so like tossed together. Like it was probably like directed in the editing room. You know, it's like they shot a lot, did a lot of sequences, and then they come back and I was like, okay, we got to paste something together. I don't know. I mean, do you think there was any intention here on the camp side or the irony side?
It's hard to tell with this kind of movie, I think especially because, I mean, at least Dan and I didn't live through the 70s. I'm not going to presume your age, Sean Patrick, but
I was alive in the late 70s, but no,
okay.
not but very.
Right. So having essentially like missed what that was like, it does feel like there's a lot lost in translation between kind of what people expected from science fiction, because there is that weird leap. And we'll get into this in the season finale when we finally get back to the 50s, where they had like lots of interesting conceptual things going on with monster movies and robot and alien films, but they hadn't quite gotten there in terms of like actually putting it on screen in a convincing manner, right? Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
And I think that's kind of like there's a little bit of like backsliding progress happening here, perhaps, because I don't know. I'm curious. Have either of you seen? I didn't even know there was another adaptation of Matheson's novel, literally called Last Man on Earth from '64 with Vincent Price.
Vincent Price. I've never seen that. No,
I've never. I didn't know it existed until I was reading the Wikipedia for this movie.
Same.
I mean, one can only assume that it's way campier than this, and it's got Vincent Price on it.
and that's what I'm saying is like, I don't know. Do you remember, Dan? We had an episode where we talked about this movie that kind of was the start of I don't know. It wasn't Joan Didion who actually originally coined the term camp, based on their writing about this movie we watched and discussed called Ride with the Devil. The Bogart movie. And it's Bogart, right? Bogart's so drunk on screen that like it's very questionable whether or not that like it seems like it's campy or it's just like a poor attempt at an adventure movie that happens to have Humphrey Bogart at the center. And I feel like that kind of thing's going on here where it's like I could see Vincent Price just like hamming it up and having it be total fun. But
absolutely. I mean, he's kind of perfect for it. He can kind of look down on the proceedings. You can sense he has such wit. Price always had great wit to what he did. I think he would be absolutely perfect for this role.
Right. And in advance of the Mike Flanagan series, House of Usher, I watched the Vincent Price version of House of Usher, and he totally crushes it. Just like every scene is ham-fisted, but it feels like that's its purpose. And I don't know. I'm sorry to bring up Morbius yet again, but like one of the ways in which Morbius could have been fun was if you didn't have a dirtbag as the protagonist.
Jared Leto, come on.
If Leto had a sense of humor,
exactly.
Or he had an ounce of self-awareness.
He has none whatsoever.
Yeah. Speaking of blinkered, Jesus.
But going back to this idea of I don't know that. Looking at the director Boris Sagal, he's Russian, and you look at some of the stuff that he did on TV, and he doesn't seem to have much of a sense of humor. He seems like a guy who's pretty straightforward and probably would have directed this in a pretty straightforward manner. Just based on, I mean, he was part of the directing team for Rich Man, Poor Man, which is. Today you watch that and it's just it's like daytime drama levels of over the top. I don't think he's the type of guy who would have approached this material with camp in his mind either. I think he would have approached it kind of the way that Heston did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the movie does seem to be, like Chris, you were saying, like a regression. Because when I see this, it reminds me of like Them or like a 50s sort of monster movie where it's almost zany. It's like it's almost comedic on some level. What is so bizarre about that is we in the 2000s episode we talked about War of the Worlds, Spielberg's War of the Worlds, and like in that, like you think about try to compare like the opening of Omega Man versus the opening of War of the Worlds, and it's just like night and day in terms of like the realism, the attempts at realism. And like, Spielberg's like making commentary on 9/11, and like he says it's kind of like the sequel to like Saving Private Ryan, and like made this very grounded, gritty, naturalistic sci-fi movie. Whereas this is kind of I don't know when the transition happened, but maybe like you look at like we did Terminator and Aliens for the 80s. Terminator seemed pretty grounded, right? That wasn't like zany.
Within its universe, yeah.
Yeah, within its universe, and like, but Alien what was Alien 79?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, try to compare this to Alien.
I know,
and you're like,
bizarre.
How is this
they
the
came out in the same
art?
decade.
Yeah, it's like they're just so completely different universes in terms of like intention.
Well, or even bring up like Kubrick's Clockwork Orange, which is the exact same year as Omega Man.
Yeah,
like the kind of. And, 2001's 3 years prior, like, it's not that we didn't have filmmakers that knew how to, like, work within the confines of the decades, right? So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Sean Patrick, is like, if you have a hired hand from Russia and you're trying to adapt a pulp novel and you put Charlton frickin' Heston in the center of it, like, it's a recipe for disaster. So my big question to you guys is, why the hell has this movie stood the test of time?
I think people love the premise. I think they're fascinated by the idea of the last man on Earth, and I think the premise it is a grabber. That's why the novel is so well remembered. That's why people keep going back to it to make more movies. It's got a solid premise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's the thing that drew me to it back in the day when I first saw it. I was like, oh, this is like a really fascinating idea. If you're into, post-apocalyptic things, we did the Road also in this series for the 2000s episode. And, not the last man on Earth, but pretty darn close. And it's like, I think there's something inherently interesting about thinking about being alone in the world, or one of the last few people alive, and how that changes everything. How it changes how you think about yourself, how you think about other people, how you think about life.
I think today, if you're regularly having any conversations about climate change, you're constantly thinking about the potential for the end of the world. So, looking at media that reminds you of what a post-apocalypse might look like. Like, there's a Don Johnson movie where it's just a boy and a dog. Like that's a good example of that genre, which is actually a weird, strange, kind of wonderful movie. Those kind of movies where it's the last man on Earth and everything is gone and there's only a few people left. It's easy to put yourself in that mindset and think about that because you're thinking about the end of your own world.
Yeah. I will want to say, since we talk about this concept of the last man on Earth story, I mean, I'm always curious because it's going to happen, especially if you have seen I Am Legend or read the novel. Like, he doesn't turn out to actually be the last man on Earth. He doesn't even turn out to be the last, non-mutant man on Earth, right?
Yeah.
And I will say there was a glimmer of hope for me. And I don't know. I feel like she kind of gets it. Rosalind Cash as Lisa, when she shows up in that ridiculous attempt to pretend to be a mannequin. Like there's glimmers there. They obviously have zero chemistry. And it's ridiculous.
She's in a completely different movie.
Right. But I'm actually like interested, like, oh, how did she like hook up with this like scientist that looks like Crocodile Dundee if he was into weed a lot, and then how did she become the protector of these children? Like, it's almost like, but then I just got like angry at the end of the second act because I was just like, God damn it, why wasn't this just like a movie about her character? Like,
right? She's a much more interesting and engaged character than he is.
I know, and I had that moment where I'm just like, I know I've seen this actress before. Where is she? She's in Clute. Loot with Donald Sutherland.
Amazing film. Absolutely
so
amazing.
good. And she has a bit role, but she's so good in that too. So it's too bad really that it seems like her presence got squandered not only in this movie, but kind of throughout her career. She kind of just went back and forth between one episode of a sitcom and a long running role in General Hospital and what have you. So good job. I'm blaming Charlton Heston for.
Definitely.
It's
No
easy
question.
to blame him. Should we dive into Zardoz?
Yeah, this got to be a more even split because it's much more interesting.
I don't even know where to begin. So, okay, here's the deal. I found this movie. I didn't know this movie existed, although I had seen the screenshot of Sean Connery and his red
iconic
thing.
image. Yeah,
Iconic image. So I remembered that when I came across the screenshot. But I was just looking for kind of off the beaten path sci-fi movies about the future and future wars. And I came across this one and I was like, this perfectly fits our kind of theme. It's, kind of something out there, not a movie that a lot of people see. So I was like, let's dive into it. I started this thing and I was like, what the F every minute for the first half hour. I have not seen a movie this strange in my life. I don't know about you. You guys know about this movie? You've seen it before. What's sort of our take on our initial reactions to this thing?
Sean Patrick, you were the one that was like, I want to pick to be on this episode because of Zardoz. So explain yourself.
I'd never seen it before this week. I'd only seen Sean Connery's outfit. And I always have wondered what possible context that outfit could exist within. And I still don't know what context.
Exactly.
No. Unexplained.
Bandolier and panties. I don't understand. Thigh-high boots. What was anyone thinking?
This feels like the product of a lot of heavy drug use.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking when we were talking about Omega Man, like part of the way that movie and this movie come about is like it feels like it's a hangover from the 1960s. They did all the drugs in the late 60s, and then in the 1970s they're just kind of coming out of it. The hangover, they're waking up and like make whatever you want. I gotta get up tomorrow.
I gotta make some money. Chris, what about you? Did you know about this? See this before?
No. I was super psyched that you picked it because I had only known the iconic image, and I had always been like kind of curious from afar, but like never enough to actually seek it out. And when you put it on the spreadsheet, I was just like, all right, let's go. I have to be ready for this. And just like some cursory research before I pressed play, I was just like, wait, this thing has like a proper like Arrow Video Blu-ray edition. Like this, I thought this was a bad movie. And I was confused by like not only the opening sequence, but finding out that it was directed by John Borman, who did Deliverance,
which is like a masterpiece.
It's one of the most tense rides you would have in watching a movie, emotionally and otherwise. And I think that I also kind of had a weird setup because I had never seen any of the Exorcist sequels. So this past October, I ran through them and saw Exorcist 2, The Heretic, directed by Borman. And I was just like, okay, this guy is absolutely insane. I cannot wait to see what Zardoz actually ends up being. And so I was like you, Dan, I was like pressing play and I'm just like, is this actually just like, I got like mega like David Lynch's Dune vibes watching this. Yeah. And I was just like, but like even making less sense and without even less context because there's no, source material from which to better understand the world that we're thrown into here. And so, it was a really unique experience. And dare I say, I kind of loved this movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna say like I had like almost a level of disgust when I started it because I felt like existentially had existential vertigo. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I might be losing my mind.
Oh gosh.
But as I settled into it, I was like, you know what? Here's the thing. I am always appreciative of an artist who has a unique vision and has the will to make it happen and to put it on screen. And that's certainly what happened here, right? This is somebody who had some ideas, inspired by Lord of the Rings, and kind of went off on a tangent and, really just wanted to, put his vision on screen, and he was able to do it. I don't think it's a failure in that sense, in the sense that he did get what he wanted to get out there. But what he put out there was so bizarre and so strange that it's hard to tell if it's successful in the sense of he achieved what he wanted to, but so what? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but what was he achieving? I mean, what was the point of any of this?
But that's the interesting. What do you think the point was, Sean Patrick? What do you got for this movie?
I truly have no idea. I did a lot of research for this one, and I heard the story that he was smoking a lot of pot at the time, and he had a very powerful agent who who leveraged that Deliverance hit into getting him $1.5 million and a green light that said, "Just do what you want." And he was just really high, and he just knocked out the script, and he was going to have Burt Reynolds in it, and Burt Reynolds suddenly got sick, and then he landed on Sean Connery, and they went ahead and made the movie. And what this is about, though, I mean, you played that clip of the gun is good, the penis is bad, and what? All of the exposition happens off screen. He's been bred from the past to now to be built to kill the future. What?
Yeah. Okay. Let's dig in, because I am so kind of all about this kind of dream logic pastiche nonsense, and part of the fun, for me anyways, is trying to find some kind of pattern and resemblance of meaning amongst the chaos, because there's like you were saying, Dan, it's one of those films that the more I think the way you put it is perfect. It's it almost entrances you with how disgusting it is, until there is some kind of turning point where it pivots, and you're just all of a sudden, I don't know, am I crazy?
You get invested.
Yeah. I'm oh my gosh,
I know. Be an hour in. I was
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm just
wait a second. Okay.
Suddenly the world makes sense, and I'm just how? Because this made no sense 5 minutes ago.
Because you have to learn the language, right? He's creating a visual, emotional, intellectual language, and by the time you get to an hour in, you're you've bought into the basic premise of here are the Eternals, and here are the whatever the hell they're called,
the Brutals,
the Brutals, and he's an exterminator, Terminator, whatever it is, and it's okay, but to me, what plays well, it's very sexual film in a way that
very horny movie,
very horny movie, in a way that you just don't get nowadays. And I'm oh, this is kind of fun, that's enjoyable. I don't know. There's, will I ever rewatch this movie? No.
I'm going to.
There's no chance in hell I'm going to rewatch this thing. But I just like the fact that it exists. And it's the type of movie where if I have a good friend and they haven't seen it, I'd be let's just sit down and watch this together.
Yes.
Let's experience this together. And I want to see their face and their reactions, and as they're sort of their mouth just goes wide open, and you're just just go with it, just let it happen.
An early 2000s throwback to Two Girls, One Cup. You're just watching people watch this movie.
Yeah.
Just watching the reactions of the horror on the screen. But yeah, there is something about it that's kind of charming in a way. That it's how did you? I mean, there's a lot of things that are fascinating about it. How did this get made?
Yeah.
Like this is 20th Century Fox. Like, it's just like, how is Sean Connery on set going through this? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
How did they get him in that outfit? How did they get him in the wedding dress? How did they just convince him? And he seems game for it all.
Totally.
I mean, just all he's all in.
Yeah, no, he's not shy about it, but he's also not like hamming it up, because that's not Sean Connery's thing.
No.
So, like, the thing that really worked for me is that you have this kind of, he's basically treated like an avatar, right? But he's also treated like an other. And so I'm getting like heavy vibes from the Wizard of Oz stuff. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert, because that reveal was nuts, dude. I was so like, I can't imagine what I would have been like if I had seen this at a formative age. Because,
oh no!
Like, oh god!
If I saw this in my 20s, it would have ruined me for like.
But essentially, like, I think what's so impressive, and I'm sorry to bring back David Lynch again, but like, he also had a Wizard of Oz fixation, albeit in the 80s, and I think that's such like a fascinating kind of touchstone text for these kinds of filmmakers that, you know, on one side of the equation just like get totally smoked out and then write a screenplay, and on the other side of the equation like get deep into transcendental meditation and write a screenplay. And you're kind of seeing this like two sides of the same coin thing going on here, where essentially that's perhaps like the ultimate allure of the Wizard of Oz story, is this kind of concept of the false god, of the journey back home. And I mean, I'm curious, like, is there a war going on here to bring us back to the theme? Yes, technically.
But
like, it's interesting how it's like played out in the background mostly, or like in allusion and reference, because the majority of the narrative is focused on like this experiment or obsession over the brutal, and like, is it deserving of the Eternals' attention? Is it, and like they keep referring to Sean Connery as an it, right? Like, it feels so like simultaneously unusual and almost like fairy tale-esque that I think that's part of like that attraction, is like it's got so much of those, and the horniness, like it's got like so many like immature aspects to it, but also this really complex, seemingly and arguably nonsensical, you know, mechanisms of bringing the plot together, not to mention all the stuff going on with like the fucking tabernacle and shit. Like, you don't be, I think that's the thing that's refreshing. And I think it's refreshing particularly after watching Omega Man, which kind of plays that whole Last Man on Earth trope beat by beat by beat, especially if you've seen or read I Am Legend, especially if you kind of know what to expect from like a schlocky 70s movie.
Yeah, there feels like there's no invention there, whereas here, this is constant invention.
Right,
totally.
Just like an orgy of invention.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that like I like about this movie is
Well, you know, it's interesting. I was sitting here thinking about what is this, like, what is it about this movie that strikes me? And I would go back to that. There's that opening sequence, and granted, he added that afterwards at the behest of the studio.
Right.
But the whole Arthur Frayne opening, where he refers to cinema, where he starts talking about movies.
Yes.
It kind of is like the whole thing does kind of feel like a deconstruction of film culture, or at least the culture of film up until the 1970s. If you really want to drill down on it in a very macro level, like there is an element here of people frozen in time, which, you know, kind of when you look back at movies of the 40s and 50s, those people are essentially frozen in time. Like there's an element there. He's like he's reaching for something. He's not getting there, but he's reaching for something.
Yeah, and you can feel the reaching and the attempt, and sometimes that's enough. I think, especially on the heels of watching so many movies, not just from the 70s, but you know, including modern film that just like feels so entrenched in formula and you know, predictability. And so to have this, I don't know, I was kind of getting, definitely not on like a cosmic or spiritual level, but I was getting some 2001 A Space Odyssey vibes, because you have a lot of kind of bigger questions at play with, like, you know, even on like a very obvious correlation, the embryo getting, like, starting over again, right? That like death is impossible because we're constantly being reborn, even when we destroy ourselves. It's just like such a hodgepodge that even if it doesn't totally work on a serious level, the camp combined with the amount of invention is enough to be like, I'm glad I spent that. I can't believe I'm saying it, but the movie where Sean Connery looking like Burt Reynolds in a red thong is actually kind of cool. Like,
I was kind of happy that Burt Reynolds' mustache made it onto Sean Connery. That's great. It was good that they kept that through line.
Oh yeah.
I think
I think I did find one keystone for this that might kind of unlock it a little bit. And I don't know if Borman's ever talked about this, but I do wonder if he saw El Topo or maybe even Holy Mountain before he went into this, because there's a lot of Jodorowsky style in this.
Right. Maybe this is Jodorowsky's Dune. And we just
Maybe.
Oh my gosh. That's a really good point, because I think going back to this question of like 70s as being a transition decade, like there was a lot of big, obvious, loud stuff going on with spectacle, but there was so much more interesting things happening with like the age of New Hollywood. And, you know, this is, you know, the birth of Scorsese and so many of the other new masters, that like it's clear here that, I don't know, Zardoz feels like it fits in this kind of weird like crevice between an auteurist like vision that is incredible and complete trash. And that's kind of what makes it so cool, is like, I can't think of anything else like it except the more experimental stuff that doesn't have Sean Connery in a thong, though maybe it should have. Maybe that would have improved. No, I can't say that with a straight face.
I mean, that guy's wearing a diaper throughout most of Holy Mountain. So
Good point.
Is there a parallel here to Southland Tales? Anybody?
You got to bring in Southland Tales.
I mean, in terms of like just a weird visionary filmmaker doing what he wants.
I'm thinking of a proven filmmaker who follows up a near masterpiece with a self-indulgent, crazy sci-fi whatever.
Definitely see that.
Is so full of ideas. Like, that's the one thing I got out of this too. Like, when you're watching it and trying to make sense of it, you're trying to sort of pick apart the philosophical viewpoints that he's bringing up constantly in all these different contexts. And there's a lot going on here. And it's not just like some simplistic sort of, like thoughts on violence and gender and sex. And it's not, I didn't find it was very simplistic at all. There's a lot of nuance and layering to go to the viewpoints. Is it bonkers? 100%. Does it make sense? Not entirely. But it's almost like the first draft of a philosophical paper. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, and then after he did the LSD or something, and then he turned into a graphic novel. But you know what I mean? It's just a weird amalgamation of high art, low art, which is why it's perfect postmodernism. Right. It's just like there's like there's some porn in here a little bit.
Oh yeah.
There's like, vicious violence. And there's just like weird zany stuff going on. I'm like, it's a romp. It's a fun movie.
Definitely.
And
I never want to watch it again, but I absolutely agree that it is fun. Like, I had a great time watching it. I'm never going to sit through it again. I had a great time while I watched it.
Yeah, it's surprisingly enjoyable. So if you haven't seen it, buckle up and just take it for a spin.
Did you guys see what Roger Ebert said about this movie?
No, what did he say?
Yeah, do tell.
So the opening line of his review, he calls this movie quirky. Quirky. What?
It's an understatement. Jesus.
That is a desperate understatement. My favorite thing that I did research on in this was I saw an interview on YouTube with John Borman talking about this movie, and he was talking about them putting it back out or remastering it to put it out again. And he was asked. The studio wrote him an email, and they wrote to me and said they were restoring Zardoz, and I said, why?
Yes.
And he said that he goes on to say it's one of those films that went from being a failure to a classic without ever passing through success.
That's wonderful. That's the British wit right there.
What a great guy! It just makes me love this even more.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And
What
that's
did he
the
like?
right. I was just gonna say, that's the right attitude, considering for me, anyways, having just watched Exorcist II: The Heretic, because maybe I know maybe it's uncouth to say just on the heels of his death, but like, is it possible that Friedkin was taking it a little too seriously, and maybe Borman was kind of trying to inject some insanity to it, not because that was the best choice for the franchise, but because, like, if you're going to make a sequel to an iconic horror movie, you might as well have some fun with it, right?
I mean, this movie is definitely on the same wavelength.
Exactly.
Yeah, he clearly likes to have a good time.
But he also made Deliverance. What the fuck? Like, is he having
which is one of the darkest movies I've ever seen.
So weird. It's such a strange career.
I'm looking at
I think The Exorcist 2 is terrible. I think it's a terrible movie, but it is, again, it's a terrible movie that's fun to watch.
Yeah. And he kind of like doesn't. What does he do after this? Hope and Glory. You guys ever seen that in '87?
I've never seen it.
No, I don't remember. I don't recognize a lot of his films from the '90s. Into the Taylor of Panama, I guess, would be one.
Yeah, Taylor of Panama is a pretty good movie. Jeffrey Rush is really great in that movie. But no, like The Emerald Forest, Hope and Glory. Where the Heart Is, I think I've seen, but I'm not sure. It's really, I'm kind of lost on trying to remember that one.
I kind of want to watch Excalibur now, though.
Right.
And
I've heard amazing things about that, and considering it comes off the heels of Exorcist 2, it makes it that much more interesting.
Yeah, it looks really fascinating now. Anybody who can make a movie like Zardoz, you kind of have to like it, as long as it's a movie where he's like out there doing something different, it's probably worth checking out just for the entertainment value.
Absolutely. But it does not seem like he dipped his toes into horror or science fiction again, right?
Doesn't look like it.
Not really. Yeah, he seems to have stepped out of that particular genre.
Yeah. So it does seem like this kind of. I'm curious because we're looking at this from that zoomed out lens again. If we're thinking about the ways in which different decades filmmakers kind of viewed the future and this idea of like warfare or conflict, revolution, oppression, dictatorship. I think that's one of the things that kind of stands out about the 70s. And maybe once again, it could be as simple as just saying it was the drugs, idiot. But did you like the vibes I'm getting from both of these movies, if there is any kind of overlapping characteristic besides the decades that they were released in, is it kind of trying to suggest or explore this notion of like in the future when things get really dark and unusual and humanity becomes less human, we're still going to be fucking?
That is definitely a theme of these films.
You think that you look at both of them and it's like the way they view the future is so it's so odd and disconnected from their present. Anytime we talk about these new movies, it's always like the future is obviously a reflection of what they're going through in the time, right? But with these, it feels as though, like Zardoz especially, it's almost like he thinks the future is going to be a lot of conversations about morals and like, right? You know, like, and maybe that was something that was going on back in the 70s. But like, you look at more recent films thinking about the future, like we did The Creator, and it's like, I don't know. There's something about that time period in the 70s where there had to be a lot of self-reflection going on about society in general, at least in America or whatever. Because, very sort of heady stuff. I mean, Omega Man, less so. Kind of like whatever.
Omega Man's kind of like a genre programmer. I think they made that for drive-ins. Like
exactly. It's almost like borderline exploitation. Yeah.
Like this one, Zardoz, was made by a guy who was like, I'm making this movie. I'm making it my way. I've got a very unique vision for it, and this is what's happening.
And his future is sort of like, it's fantasy. Like it's like Lord of the
Pure-
Rings, his own version of Lord of the Rings. I was like, that's
Wild
an interesting
fantasy.
take. But yeah, I mean, it's so bizarre. You just kind of have to see it. It's like a midnight movie. It's the perfect midnight movie to play at like a movie theater, like an arty one.
Oh,
But,
definitely.
It's something else. Trivia.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's
Trivia.
jump into it. It's so weird to look at the 70s in terms of not just science fiction writ large, but also like trying to find that element where it's like, this is how it's going to go down when like people start turning on each other. So I'm very curious to see if you guys notice any similarities in not only the films we just discussed, but amongst these 5 movies that are going to be the answers to Film Trace Trivia. So, Sean Patrick, real quick, the rundown is pretty simple. These are other movies from the 1970s that at least loosely fit into our theme of future wars. And I'm going to give you keywords, 5 of them. I'll list them slowly and see who can name the correct film first. And it's on 5, so we'll see if you beat Dan, and I hope you do, because he's won the last couple, and his ego is getting a little out of control.
You gotta pop it like a balloon.
Okay. Number 1.
Okay.
Amusement park. Androids.
Westworld.
Yeah, there you go. Good.
I'm gonna get crushed.
Yeah, that was a layup. Where were you, Dan?
I prefer the TV series.
Oh God!
All 4 seasons of it.
In my quick research for that, quick side note, I did not know that there was 2 sequels to the original Westworld film.
Yeah.
Future World
really?
and Beyond Westworld.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I don't know. Might dig into that. We'll see. Okay, next. This one is not as easy, but maybe still relatively so. Supercomputers. The Energy Corporation. The Executive Committee. The Futility of Individualism. Gladiator Fight on Wheels.
Mad Max?
Not bad guess. Not a bad guess at all. This film was also remade in 2002. Gladiator Fight on Wheels. Is it that forgettable?
Oh, Death Race, isn't it? Is it Death Race?
Oh, not those kind of wheels.
Darn it.
Wait.
This was a dystopian science fiction sports film by Norman Jewison.
Rollerball.
Rollerball. There we
got
go.
it. Is that remade? I forgot they remade that.
Yeah.
It's a terrible remake. It
I'm
is
sure
one
it
of the
is.
worst movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay, that's okay. Technically, that goes to Sean Patrick. So
It does. He gets a 2-0.
2-0. Here we go. Do I want to do a hard one again or something easier? Let's go with easier. Ilium, New York. Tralfamadore. Fourth Dimension. The firebombing of Dresden. Vietnam. Adaptation of another famous dystopian novel.
I got nothing.
Oh my gosh. Ilium, New York was also a setting in this novelist's other works that took place in the future.
Catch-22? What?
You're so close. The other one.
Oh, Cat's Cradle?
No, not. Okay, you're
Further away?
further away now. But
Oh, darn it.
number in the title.
Oh,
Same author as Cat's Cradle.
I should know this.
Didn't we read this in high school together, Dan?
Probably.
Okay, I gotta call the mulligan on this, unless you have a final guess.
No.
It is Slaughterhouse 5.
Oh, okay.
What?
Okay. That makes sense.
I've actually read that too.
I know, right? Maybe it's been a while.
forgotten it years ago.
It's been a while for me
I
as
should have
well.
got Firebombing Dresden. That's like
Firebombing Dresden.
Yeah.
the little key, because he was actually went through it. Yeah, okay.
Right, exactly. Semi-autobiographical.
Yikes.
Not a good movie though. Book is incredible though. Okay, here's one that will make you guys lose faith in me even more, perhaps.
Cool.
Cool, love it. Vandenberg Air Force Base. Odd Man Hypothesis. United States Senate Committee on Space Sciences. Cultures and Growth Medium.
Silent Green?
Ooh, good guess. No. And last but not least, Sterno.
It's right there. It's right
Life
there.
Force, but that's the 80s.
Is it Silent Running?
Oh, that's another really good guess.
That's a good guess. Yeah.
Similar to Westworld, it's a Michael Crichton adaptation.
Something Strain.
Yeah, what is it?
Andromeda Strain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Andromeda Strain.
okay. I gotta give you halvesies on that one, guys.
Yeah, half point. Let's go. I'm gonna end it with a half point. I know it.
Oh my gosh. And last but not least, I'm not sure if anybody's really seen this movie, but it's a personal favorite of mine, and I'm going to tell you to give you give you a little bit of a handicap. It's animated.
Okay.
Nuclear War. Trolls, Fairies, Elves, and Dwarves.
The 70s?
Mm-hmm. Nazi propaganda.
Oh, Chris.
Psychological warfare. No, not The Wall, but once again, same kind of vibe. Obviously, 70s animation that's dark as hell. Teleportation.
No idea.
I'm not up on my 70s animation.
That's okay. It's maybe the only 70s animation I know besides The Wall. But Mark Hamill was a voice in it, and it was made by a guy named Ralph Bakshi, who is kind of a Hollywood animation scoundrel of sorts, because he was kind of the main guy behind Fritz the Cat, the only widely released pornographic animated film.
I'm going to kick myself because Dan Olson did an incredible video on Bakshi, and I know he mentioned this movie, but I don't remember it.
Yeah. Oh man, I highly recommend it. It's called Wizards.
Wizards. Okay.
Yes, from '77, and it is a wild ride. And I actually. I wanted to mention it when we were talking about Zardoz, but I couldn't because I knew it was a trivia answer. If you are fascinated, I almost think Wizards works better than Zardoz did in finding that kind of weird crevice in between brilliant and batshit, because there is this really kind of beautiful darkness to the animation that almost elevates it above what you could do with live action. So I would definitely recommend seeking that out. Thank you so much. Technically, on a half point technicality, Sean Patrick is the winner. Good work.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you.
Dude. Good stuff, man.
Thank you for being here, Sean Patrick. It's been really fun talking about the wacky world of the 70s science fiction films with you.
It was a lot of fun, and like I said, I was looking for an excuse to watch Zardoz, so this turned out great for me.
What do you got coming up on the podcast on I Hate Critics?
We're going to be talking about the new Nicolas Cage movie. It's coming out this weekend. That now, of course, the title would escape me. It's a dream scenario. Scenario. So we're talking about that.
Hell. Yeah.
I botched our last new episode in the recording, so we're going to be talking about Saltburn again. Myself and my co-host Jeff.
Nice.
So yeah, those are two, and Godzilla -1 is coming up.
Very cool, man.
Yeah, I'm excited. Cool. Thank you so much once again. This has been Film Trace.